A doctor came in, he goes, "Hey, we are diagnosing you with heart failure." That diagnosis is a death sentence. We've got a daughter, she's 3. I remember bawling my eyes out, imagining abandoning this little girl.
Yeah.
Americans don't even understand how the world works. Completely naive. 72% of the world's population lives under the threat of an autocrat. Very evil world. The hero is seeking justice. The villain is seeking vengeance. The villain has the same backstory. They experience pain, but what they decided to do with that pain was different.
I resonate with the villain sometimes.
Bestselling author and entrepreneur Donald Miller believes life isn't something that just happens. We're the ones writing the story. And he's helped millions craft a life of meaning and create brands worth buying by redefining our heroes and our villains. Because the key to personal and professional growth isn't just hard work, but learning to take control of the narrative.
It is so much easier for us to be a helpless victim.
Identifying as a victim is not going to help you. Anxiety and depression, lower wages, less quality relationships. The number one predictor of that is
I must tell you, I was so excited about this conversation because you've got new content all the time coming out. I love what you've done with Story Brand, the new book. We'll get into some of that. But as I was doing some research, I was over on Instagram, or as the gram I call it, to make my daughter roll her eyes. It was one of those whoop moments, and I leaned in and said, what's going on? And I want to start there.
Yeah.
But what you shared on that post was that you had a very, very scary kind of health report. Turned out to be not a big deal, as you said, but for a period of, I believe you said 8 days.
8 terrifying days.
I got to ask, on the other side of that, how did that shape your relationships? Because I know you're a dad. I know you're a husband.
I'm so thankful for this question because it's not what I do, so I don't talk about it very much. But when you and I met, I was close to 400 pounds. 387 to be exact. I'm 185 as of this morning. The benefit of losing 200 pounds over a series of years is you feel like you're aging in reverse. You literally feel like at 50, I was in much better shape than 30. So you kind of feel like you're moving backwards, and that's really great. My wife lost her mom to a brain tumor. So my wife was a little bit worried about losing her husband. And I'm like, I'm in the best shape. She goes, I know, but can we just go down and get you checked out and see if there's anything? Because, if we would have discovered this with my mom. So we got in the hospital. She literally checks me in, and over 48 hours, they just do an enormous number of tests, carotid arteries, all the 50 plus stuff. The doctor just kept coming in saying, you are unbelievable. You have you got the arteries of a 12-year-old. You got we're not finding anything. And your wife has nothing to worry about. And then at the second day, a different doctor came in, and the doctor who had been coming in was behind him, kind of looking over his shoulder as though to study how to have a difficult conversation. And I felt it. You can feel
tell.
it. And his first question was, do you have any kids? And I'm like, yeah, we've got a daughter. She's 3. And he said, okay. And he just looked troubled. I'm like, hey, what's going on? You got to tell me. He goes, hey, we are diagnosing you with heart failure. And your heart is very, very strong, but it's just stiff, cardiomyopathy. And, it's at a 38% ejection fraction. Normal starts at 55, goes to about 70. You're at 38%. I mean, I'm like, dude, I can out-push up you right now. We can run stairs. Right. And he's like, well, you have something called athlete's heart, which is just like a really hard-working heart, but it's overcompensating. And he said, hey, we're going to put you in touch with the cardiologist, and you're going to meet with him in 8 days. I went down the Google rabbit hole, and there is nothing online that says you're here in 5 years. That diagnosis is a death sentence. So I didn't have anybody to talk to. And for 8 days, I mean, I remember bawling my eyes out, and just imagining abandoning this little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. And so it shaped everything. What was really most eye-opening to me was that I didn't care about finishing a book. I didn't care about my legacy. I cared about finances because I wanted Betsy to be okay. And so, just called our lawyers, sat down with my leadership team because I cared about my staff. But what mattered to me more than anything, I was just shocked because I am a relational guy, but I'm not a relationship first guy. I'm a let's get ish done.
Right.
And let's make sure that we got this thing built and we're solving problems. And then I've learned to be more relational over the years. But at that point, it was my buddies, knowing I loved them,
Yeah. That's
family.
it.
So,
Yeah.
and the great thing is 8 days later, we go to the cardiologist. We get in the doctor's office. The nurse comes in, she does the pre-questions. The very first question she asks is, do you have your will in order? And my wife now is leaning in.
Right.
And I just interrupted her. I said, hey, before we get going, I'm reading 1 to 5 years. And she says, yeah, 1 to 5 years, about right, if you're lucky. And my wife sinks. I sink. Okay, we just got confirmation. The doctor comes in 20 minutes in. I stop him and I just say, hey, man, am I here in 20 years? He goes, oh, yeah, you're here in 20 years. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I was like, you guys need to clarify your message. I got a book for you.
Yeah, exactly right.
And even then, for months afterwards, I was like, I don't know who's telling the truth here. And then we ended up getting an ejection fraction about 10 days later that was already to 45%. And then now it's potentially it's north of 50. And there's some things that you can do. I will end up with a heart that is probably north of 70%, which would be the extreme high, because the heart can be rebuilt.
Right.
So just so that everybody listening understand, congestive heart failure is your heart is blocked and it's failing. Cardiomyopathy is the actual structure of your heart is too stiff. That is all 100% reversible. My doctor is now saying 100 years is not out of the question in terms of your heart. It's probably going to die some other way.
Right.
Before then, but
right.
So that it's been an amazing journey, but it's also been incredible to have it tested and to know I'm actually here for my little girl and my wife.
Yeah.
And even my team, I've got 35 people on my team, and they became twice as much like family to me as they were before.
Oh, I'm sure.
Letting somebody go is now, we're going to have to talk about this. That's a child of God right there.
Right.
And so it really adjusted everything. Even I had some pretty darn ambitious goals, and a lot of those goals are now gone.
Well, that's my follow-up. Sometimes people treat ambition like a dirty word.
Yeah.
I don't tend to like that, because I think obviously the heart is what's going on there, but I think there's healthy ambition. And I know you to be a guy who wants to make a difference in a lot of different ways. How has that moment, that scary 8 days, how has that shaped your professional vision?
Well, I'll start with how it's cost my professional vision, because that's more important. I was for years at a coffee shop at 7 a.m. opening the door. I mean, they might as well have given me the key.
Right.
Because I was there before they were, because I was going to work, right? We're going to go from 7 to 11. I'm going to get my content created, and then I'm going to go to the office and meet. That changed to I spend the first hour of my day with my daughter. So it turned into rules. In hindsight, if you're going to be a good dad, kids spell love, Time, so you're going to have to do time. I would say 27 out of 30 days in a month, I'm home before 5. Usually 4. And so those are hours that are with my family. I travel maybe once a month. If I can get out and back in a day, I do that. And it's all just about time spent, because I know for a fact I'll regret it. If you're healthy, you think you're going to live forever. So we'll be a dad down the road when the lie is, this is it. This is your window, and you're not getting another one. So that was the most wonderful thing. The other thing is I just got a lot more laser focused on what was important to create. And the plan got less ambitious. There were things that I had put into maybe a third career that I think have been sufficiently removed because that would cost my family. And so we're not going to do that. But God has opened some other doors that have been incredible, that have scratched that itch without me having to break the rules. That's what's really been insane.
Interesting.
Is, I wanted to, as a third career, go into politics either to run or to help shape the vision for the country. And that's come off just being a messaging guy working on criminal justice reform and immigration reform. And, these issues where I'm helping people, talk about things so that we can get things done has opened the curtain on our political system and some of the things that need to be fixed. And so I thought maybe I'm going to be the guy, and then that has zero interest to me anymore. What that costs your family if you want to run for Congress or Senate, it's Monday to Thursday, 33 weeks out of the year
No
that you are
question.
not with your family. So you're saying bye to dad at that point.
Yeah.
And that has not been okay with my wife. Never was, but I thought, well, I'll talk her into it when we get there. And so now it's just, that's not happening anymore. And then since then, national security has become a big client, and they're looking at an advisory board position, focusing on China policy. Just stuff that you just go, that would never, I don't know, like, how did I get there without trying and making these rules that I would protect my family? And ultimately, look, if you're not willing to take care of your own family, I don't know why you should be trusted with the American families.
Great statement.
Right? You got to live it, and then maybe you can go and help other people do it. And so, I'm just letting God lead from there. And I will say this, since that diagnosis, it's been less than a year, more happiness and more meaning in my life than ever before.
That's so good.
Ever.
I think you're one of the most creative people that I've ever met. You've got an unbelievable ability, whether it's to write or to come up with a talk, books, your stuff always connects. What is your process now? Whether that be a book, a product for your company, a new revenue stream, a service, whatever Donald Miller is creating, what is that initial process like for you?
It's a lot of, I always, in the creative process, I've always seen myself as sort of an air traffic control guy. Like I'm in a airport tower, and here's a book on fatherhood, and here's a book on a new plan for America, and here's a book on being a great communicator, and here's a book on story brand for dentists, whatever. And I'm just like, which one I don't ask which one is best to land or which one is the strategic most important. Which one wants to land next? And then I will focus on that for a year and get that plane on the ground. And then
how do you know that it wants? Which one wants it more?
There's a word flow that's starting to happen. The ideas are starting to come. Prayer is a massive part of it.
Sure.
Give me words, and if anybody wants to be a creative content creator, you have got to be very, very disciplined at putting away set hours every day. And for me, that is roughly 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. My assistant knows to protect those hours. It's been at a coffee shop for years, but I just had a little nook built inside my home office that I can write in. I get to do that tomorrow morning for the first time in that little nook. And I know I'll write probably 3 books in that little nook. And, the space is important. And every creative process, as you know, is a dance. And you're dancing with something, Is it God? Is it your subconscious? That's out of my pay grade. I don't know. But if you try to force it, it ain't going to work. So you're constantly asking, what is, we built a house, and you just walk around the land going, what wants to be here? Rather than what are we going to force, right? What wants to be here? In my marriage, what does this marriage want to be? Where does it want to go as a third entity? Not her, not me, but it.
Yes.
And then you let go of a little bit of the control, and it's amazing what flows when you let go of control.
Yeah.
So you are controlling what you do, whether you show up, but then the book itself begins to tell you where it wants to go.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You go with it.
Yeah, I told my wife the other night, because I'm kicking another idea around. Nobody knows. Nobody in this building, because
are you going to tell us?
Maybe not today, but the idea was, as I was telling her, I have to leave it alone for a little bit.
Yep.
I percolate on it. I think about it. I leave it alone, and I'm simply looking for,
does it stick?
Can I go forward without doing that?
Yeah.
Because I'm at that point now.
You?
It's like if I feel like I got to get this out of me, then I'm going to do it. If not, I'm going to leave it alone.
And you're the opposite of. I got an email recently. A friend said, "Hey, I want to write a book. Will you spend a day with me to map it out? I don't know what I want to write about."
Oh.
And I just emailed him back and said, what you want is to be famous. That's very different than wanting to write a book. Nobody wants to write a book. They have to write a book.
You have to.
They have to get it down. So let's go back to the drawing board. There's plenty of ways. You can go get famous on Instagram. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. Forbes recently said the most sought after skills in 2025, this is a poll of a bunch of managers and leaders. These were the top 4: interpersonal skills, adaptability, creative thinking, and AI learning. Now, I bring those up to you because I think there's a tension if we look at 2 of those. The interpersonal skills, in other words, being human and being good at it, versus this idea of machines and how they're going to be completely interwoven into our work. They already are, but it's only going to continue to advance. I think there's a tension there. And my feeling is that we've got to be able to coexist and use AI when it's dictated to us or when it actually elevates our work. But I still believe, Don, that the humanness is what will ultimately be the differentiator. When you see that list, what sticks out to you? And do you see a tension between AI and interpersonal skills?
That's a great question. Let me answer it a few ways. One is interpersonal skills of all that list is the most important thing.
Yeah.
If you want to succeed and you don't have interpersonal skills, you better be a genius. Your ideas better be so good that people can work with you.
Yeah, they have to tolerate you.
They have to tolerate you. Yeah. It's a lot easier just to,
Yeah,
and then I would actually put at the top of interpersonal skills the ability to listen.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to, you are the king at this, the ability to listen empathetically. If you can do that, there's no stopping you, period. Because, you know, we are, at that point, the computer chips are talking to each other and you're playing a huge part in that. And also people just need to be listened to. So if you're able to listen, you're providing incredible value. What AI is really good at, and I have an AI platform, storybrand.ai, that's going gangbusters. And really what it is, it's the ability, what AI is offering us is the ability to sort of put things down that don't make sense to us and then kind of ask AI, can you make sense out of this for me? Listen, I got a buddy who I've spent a lot of time with who did stuff he shouldn't be doing. He's in prison. He's going to be there for a long time and wrote me from prison. And I have no idea how to write you back. I'm mad at you. I'm frustrated. And, you know, so it's a good writing partner to go to AI and say, hey, here's everything I'm feeling about this guy. All the conflict that I've got. Don't want to be associated with him, but at the same time want to be loyal, you know, and those sorts of things. Can you help me respond to this? And it printed out a heck of a great rough draft. It was almost like, you know, meeting with a therapist saying, walk me through this. I think it can actually improve if you use it to improve relational skills. Let me give you an example of how brilliant this is. I had an artist that I'm a fan of. She is a Gothic Southern artist out of New Orleans. We own a couple of her paintings. In fact, I just bought one. And she direct messaged me. I don't know her very well, but she direct messaged me on Instagram and said, hey, I have a business question. I have hired somebody who is the assistant to somebody else. And I didn't realize she was the assistant to somebody else. And she's a very well-known socialite. And I'm feeling really insecure because I might have cost relationship here. And she seems to be a little frustrated. So I said, well, you know, I remember my wife had to navigate a frustrated relationship with somebody. She ended up buying them a little gift and a card just saying how much she appreciates them. So my friend was saying, hey, what do I do? And I said, you know, buy her a little gift and a card and just say, hey, no harm, no foul. Didn't mean anything by this. So I tell this to my wife. She goes, no, do not buy a gift. And I was like, what are you talking about? That worked great in this other situation. She goes, very different situation. Donald, do not buy a gift. Do not give that person a gift. It's going to, you know, whatever. So I go to AI and I say, hey, this is the advice I've given my friend. Here's what I think the card should say with the gift. And AI comes back and says, don't give a gift. I didn't ask that question.
Wow.
I said, don't give a gift. You will mess up this relationship. Here's why.
Fascinating.
Just write this letter. It's not what I asked. So I think when it comes to, you know, if the AI models are trained on actual truth and genuine tested wisdom, can really help you. I mean, if you have to let somebody go, I would spend some time on AI and just say, hey, I don't want to hurt this person. And how do I do this without hurting this person?
That's the single greatest endorsement I've heard for AI, that it agreed with your wife.
Well, listen, we're creating an AI. Well, my wife was very happy about that.
I'll bet.
And there is a chance she was behind the scenes actually typing it out because I'm not smart enough to know where my wife has hijacked my computer.
So great.
But, you know, we are creating a piece of software that we won't have out for a long time, but it's for coaches. And it will send out a monthly or weekly, whenever you want, survey to all of your clients, asking them, hey, what are you struggling with? Where are you hurting? Blah, blah, blah. It'll do things like every morning it'll send you a prayer list so you can pray for your clients. It'll remind you, hey, you're going into this coaching session and this is the anniversary of the death of their mom. So be aware of that. This happened because I met a friend on my front porch who, an hour into the conversation, it's a friend I don't see very often, but said, when I lost my brother, I said, oh man, I'm so sorry you lost your brother. And I just watched him sink.
Yeah.
Because he had sent me 3 pages about losing his brother that I had read and commented on, and I had forgotten.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh gosh, don't you wish you had somebody whispering in your ear?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, wait, why can't we? In the age of AI, why can't we have somebody whispering in your ear? Help us manage relationships, be encouraging to people, reminding us every day what we need to be running, along with saying, hey, tomorrow you've got at noon a meeting. And this. So I think AI is a tool that we all need to know how to use. I serve on an advisory board for the Future US, the Future Us. Mm-hmm. And it was, I don't know now, but it was the single advisory board that was taking the lead in telling Congress what to do. There's been one piece of legislation get through Congress about AI, period, as of a year ago. I don't know if anything's come up recently. But their position is, look, China is teaching AI to their elementary school kids, and our educational institutions who are ignoring AI and saying, hey, don't use it, it's cheating, and we're going to find out if you use it, are making a massive mistake. Because that's like telling mathematicians don't use a calculator.
Yeah.
We're not getting to Mars that way.
Yeah, so true.
And so I think we need to understand it is terrifying. There's no question it's terrifying in terms of what a bad person can do, a bad actor, and how quickly they can do it. When you think about the development of chemical weapons, when you think about disease spreading and being able to create weapons of mass destruction that way and do so very quickly, it's terrifying. But at the same time, it exists, and we all need to understand how to use it.
Well, we certainly fear the things that we don't know anything about, and AI certainly fits that description. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I believe each of us is designed to play a unique role in life, but sometimes mental and emotional struggles can keep us from being the best version of ourselves. More people than ever are acknowledging that mental health directly impacts how we perform in our work and our lives. But over a quarter of those people still say they avoid getting therapy due to the fear of being judged. Folks, listen, the world is better when you're healthy and happy. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, contact BetterHelp. BetterHelp is 100% online, so it's convenient for your schedule and it's affordable. They have a network of more than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And they've got over 10 years of experience matching people with just the right therapist for them. To get started, fill out a short online survey and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch therapists at any time for no extra cost. Remember, addressing mental health is not just important, it's essential for winning at work and in life. We're all better with help. So visit betterhelp.com/Ken to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Ken. I think that our nation as a whole, we are in an environment where it is so much easier for us to be a helpless victim. I think it started with marketing. Now, I don't mind if you disagree with this, but I'm going to posit this, that once marketing really figured out the best way to move the needle was to scare us, then we act out of a preponderance of caution.
Yeah.
And so we buy said product or buy said service. Do you disagree with that? And if you do, break it down in your own way. But I think that we just are in this environment now where we're just these helpless victims without the help of a product or a service.
Well, the number one way to sell a product is to position it as the solution to a problem.
Of course.
In fact, nobody buys anything unless it's the solution to a problem.
Right.
Nobody votes for a leader unless they're the solution to a problem. Nobody,
Right.
You don't take any actions unless it's the solution to a problem. The problem is when you get into marketing, you got to sort of agitate a problem that doesn't exist if you want to sell the product that is the solution to the problem. And that's where you get into the real trappings, which are the way those marketing messages affect our identity.
Yes.
And I would say the number one predictor of whether you will have a life in which you struggle with anxiety and depression, lower wages, less quality relationships, the number one predictor of that is whether or not you see yourself as a victim. Not whether you are a victim. Those are two different things. Whether you identify as a victim. Because we all know people who are victims who literally just are incapable of perceiving themselves as a victim. And they just shine. I mean, they accomplish more than any of us. And I remember watching any interview with Denzel Washington and watch somebody try to victim bait him. And by victim bait, I mean try to convince him or feel sorry for him. He will wiggle out of that so fast to the point where he gets angry.
Yes.
And you're just like, hey, I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet. I know the color of my skin. I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet. There's nothing in my life worth feeling sorry for. So shut your mouth. Let's keep going. You know, he just will not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And what he's discovered is that he benefits amazingly from that. It pays him to have that mindset. And even with my daughter, you know, one of the things, you know, I've got a 3.5-year-old. So, of course, she rightly, according to the seasons of her life, whines and wants her way. And, you know, 5 times a day I say, hey, Emmeline, Millers don't whine. We just don't whine. Right. We don't do that. And she'll say, but sometimes it's okay to whine. I go, yes, sometimes it's okay. But as a rule, we don't do. That's not what we do. I don't judge her. Hey, don't whine. You're being a loser. You're being a little victim. I'm calling her into an aspirational identity that we're attempting to live as a family, which gives her a tribe, and a tribe defined by characteristics. But really what I'm doing is I'm not letting that identity fester for very long because it's a deadly one. And if she lives in that identity, you know who's going to come along and rescue her? A really bad dude.
Yeah.
And we're not letting that happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, so to me, I think Satan is after your identity, and I think the number one thing he wants is to take you out so that you're unusable to serve God, and the number one way he's going to do that is with a victim identity.
Yeah.
And, you know, you watch somebody, had the honor of being out here with Jelly Roll recently at his house. That dude has had a victim to hero identity transformation. And look at what's 10 years in prison. That man. Look at what's happened to him. He's down 100 pounds. He's winning Grammys. He's got the best smile arguably on the planet.
Yep.
And he's an inspiration.
No question.
And it's hard. It's hard because I think victim mindset feels very, very good. It's very Rabbi Lapin would call it seductive.
Right. Is that because it's easier for us to rationalize where we are if we blame it on other people and other environments?
Yeah, well, it's an excuse.
Yeah, that's right. It's
just it's easy. An excuse. So this is my failures are somebody else's fault. It's very hard for me. It's harder for me than it is for most people. By the way, these are true statements for a lot of people. I mean, give me a break. There are people that, you know, I love Thomas Sowell's idea out of the Hoover Institute where he just talks about the fact that the world is not equal. If you think that everybody started with the same abilities, you know, you're wrong. They didn't. However, everybody is given the opportunity to shine. So you got to be honest about, you know, if the rivers on your continent don't flow toward the ocean, everybody's going to be poor because you can't get ships to those ports.
Yeah.
And so now you go, okay, what do you do with that, right? Are we going to be the victims or are we not? And but his point is you find the people who don't see themselves as victims and they can overcome anything. But that's not to say that there aren't real victims. See, I never want to be hurt. I never want to be thought of. If you've been abused and you've got trauma, you are an actual victim. What I'm saying is identifying as a victim is not going to help you.
Yeah.
You've got to see yourself as somebody with something to overcome that, by the way, if you overcome it, you will be superior to the person who never had challenge in the first place.
That's right. Yeah.
You absolutely, you're going to be more empathetic, you're going to be smarter, you're going to be tougher, you're going to have more opportunity. And you find these folks who have overcome the greatest, most accomplished people in the world. I guarantee you they had to overcome more than somebody else.
Yeah, no question. I want to ask you about the villain because I'm curious how you would look at the transition do we ever walk in the victim boots and then take them off and get into the villain boots in the same day?
Yes.
Yeah, because I one of the things, I'll be very candid, is just dealing with shame.
Yeah.
In therapy, I'm dealing with shame that I didn't even realize was shame. In other words, carrying a coat of shame and wearing it and didn't know I was wearing it.
Yeah.
And I resonate with the villain sometimes, because that tends to be
Also feels good.
it does.
Vengeance feels good.
It does.
Like sugar.
And is there a time, right? And is there such a thing as a good villain? We see this romanticized in
screenwriters
movies.
have to play a game when they make a story about a villain. The best I've ever seen is Walt Disney's movie Cruella.
Yeah.
The origin story of Cruella de Vil. Honestly, one of the best screenplays written in modern times. You got to have a villain in the story who's worse than the villain in order to help the audience identify with
So true.
And so there's tricks that you play. But ultimately, inside of us, the whole idea is, in stories, there are four main characters: the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. They're all separated. In real life, they're not separated.
Right.
They're in you.
Yes.
And that's why you identify them. You go, oh, this guy's the victim. You identify them because you felt all of it, right? But just like in a movie, if you live mostly victim mentality, what happens to the victim in the movie is nothing. The victim is a bit part that makes the hero look good. That's the whole point of them being there. And if you were playing the victim, you're making certain political parties look good because they're here to rescue you. You're making certain products look good. You're making certain doctors look good. You're making certain Enneagram 2s who want to come in and nurture you. They're looking really good. You know what you're looking like? Nothing, because people forget about you.
Yep.
You're having zero impact on the world as a victim. If you are the hero, you are taking what bad is happening in the world, and you're overcoming it. If you're the guide, you're the older hero who's now helping other heroes. And if you're the villain, you're actually wreaking havoc on the world because usually you're seeking some form of justice or control. Now, what's really interesting about the villain and the hero, both of them have the exact same backstory. In any story, you watch the next movie you watch, and watch how the hero was an orphan. Almost every one of them. The dad left, the mom left. And what the screenwriter is doing is they're trying to get you to identify as the audience with the hero, because even if you had the best parents in the world, you had to leave home at some point. And you felt like an orphan. So that orphan idea, you're resonating with even if you had the greatest parents. And they want that. They want you identifying with that hero. So there has to be some sort of setback, some sort of pain that the hero has gone through. And then the hero decides at some point they're not going to let this rule their life, and they're going to do something. They're going to lose 20 pounds. They're going to sue the chemical company, Aaron Brockovich. They're going to, they're going to do something about the injustice. What's fascinating is the villain has the same backstory. They experienced pain. They were also orphaned. But what they decided to do with that pain was different. The hero is seeking justice. The villain is seeking vengeance. And that's the only difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting you say that, because I want to ask you about this. I, had the privilege over the last 7-8 years here at Ramsey to coach 10,000 professionals on the air. So you got to coach them in 8 minutes. So you learn how to get to the point quick.
Yeah.
And I did a post on Instagram recently that went viral, some 11 million views. And I just simply said, the micromanager is afraid. And they're micromanaging you because they're terrified of something. And they're attempting to control that fear. I want leaders to lean into this here for a second, because if you find yourself, if you're getting some type of feedback, or you can sense that people are afraid of you on your team, they need to dig into this. I feel like this is a similar conversation to go, what are you trying to control?
Yeah.
From your past.
Yeah, I think the instinct of every autocrat is control. It's force.
Yes.
They get their way by force. 72% of the world's population lives under the threat of an autocrat. 72%. That's a lot of people. So Americans don't even understand how the world works. Completely naive. It is an evil, very evil world, run by very selfish men, almost exclusively. And so, I think that if you see that in yourself, if you're trying to run your house without a system that brings into play the opinions of the other people in your house and the feelings of the people in your house, how they're feeling about things, it's not going to work. By the way, that's the great thing about autocracies. None of them ever work. You're hurting the people in your house if you're trying to control them. I've found that just as a parent, the most effective tool I've got with a 3.5-year-old is empathy. In fact, I've even started to, if she's in danger, I got to step in and say, hey, stop. But if she's not, she's throwing a tantrum, she doesn't want to brush her teeth, I'm standing with a toothbrush going, I really want to go to bed. Why does this have to take an hour?
Yeah.
And I've found when I just stop and say, okay, you can control here or you can connect. You got two choices. I'm going to connect, not going to control. I'm going to say, I remember, Emmeline, Daddy, when I was a little boy, did not want to brush my teeth. And I would do the funniest stuff. I'd hide the toothbrush. She'd go, are you serious? Yeah. She steps up on the little stool. She grabs the toothbrush. Do you used to hide it? I go, yeah, I used to hide it. She's like, what else? She's brushing her teeth.
Right.
And all it was is just, will you please just take a minute and understand me?
That's right.
And sometimes if you understand them, they actually, you get what you want. You get where we need to go here. And sometimes you don't. But it certainly makes it a lot easier to have the conversation. And I don't think villains do not have friends. They all have minions. Just people who, they're not friends, they're minions. They're people who do what they say because they can't be around somebody with a free will. It's too terrifying. And I think that's a shame. That
right there is a great statement about leadership. Right there.
Yeah.
That's a great statement because that's happening in the workplace all the time.
It happens to me. I mean, I've made this mistake. I've been the villain at work 1,000 times. My team is here. They'll tell you. Yeah. They'll go, that was railroading.
Right.
And so I'm not saying but the other thing that goes here's another thing villains don't do. Let's talk about what they don't do.
Okay.
They don't apologize.
Right.
They don't reconcile. They don't admit they were wrong. They don't seek to connect. They don't seek forgiveness. And so if you're doing that stuff, you're building a family. And if you're not, you're building a dictatorship in which you're going to get a lot of things done. And you're not going to, first of all, don't trick anybody thinking that's enjoyable. You're not enjoying it. You're living in fear.
Yep.
And so I think it takes a kind of boldness to get out of the villain mindset. But villains want vengeance and control, right? Heroes want opportunity and a chance to work and a chance to prove themselves.
Yep.
Victims want it to be somebody else's fault, and guides want to help heroes win.
Yeah, I love that you say that.
You're a guide, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I mean, and sometimes I'm the victim.
We're all
That's
that. Whether or not we're in
question.
traffic or you ate breakfast.
That's exactly right. And I love that you share that because as I was really reconnecting with this content, I was like, I can see myself in all of these roles, and I think that's so important. I love how you lay that out there because I think what's interesting is I think we all have that capacity. Even the worst characters in the world that you were just listing, at some point, they had some crossroad moments, and they just couldn't choose to be a hero.
Too terrifying.
Yeah, didn't have the capacity.
Yeah, and I feel for leaders like that because obviously their past is pretty bad, and I also agree that sometimes you got to put them down.
I mean, there's a reason why the hero exists is to take out the villain. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's all good and just.
And you just need to go to heaven and have a conversation with Jesus about this one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do with you.
Right. Exactly right.
You're not dying.
Right.
You're going to go talk to Jesus.
Yeah, okay. All right. Hopefully.
Well, or somebody.
There's a good discussion about that, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
So the new book, Building a Story Brand 2.0. Act 1 is the setup.
Yeah.
And that's, you live in the real world, right? But you feel called to something bigger. There's something pulling at you. If you got a soul, at some point you're going to feel that pull. The second act is the struggle, obviously the challenges, the failures, and shaping us. The third act is resolution, where you use what you've learned to contribute. I want to go to the struggle part. It feels as though, and I'm saying this as a parent, all right, who has messed up big time on this, because Stacy and I struggled to get pregnant. It was 7 years, adoptions that did not work. It was a brutal, brutal season of longing.
Yeah.
And you were an older father as
Oh,
well.
yeah. No,
and
we had the same thing.
You know the longing issue. You know that. One of the things I've learned in therapy is that we had this anxious attachment towards our oldest son because he was the miracle.
Yeah.
And we loved that kid so ridiculous because I used to joke he's the Prince of Egypt. Like he would
That's
whimper.
how I feel.
He would
I
whimper and I
identify with
was
that.
there.
Yeah.
Goldfish?
Yeah.
Passy? Like I just appeared. That's the setup on this attachment and the struggle and not learning how to deal with that struggle. I'm now learning because I didn't deal with all that pain, it turned into this anxious attachment. Now on the other side of it, right now I can begin to see, and I'm beginning to see, okay, now I'm learning about myself. And I'm just bringing this to you, being very vulnerable, that I'm excited at 50 about what I'm going to be able to do because I feel like I'm finally understanding how to deal with all the things I've struggled with. Where before I was just gutting it out.
Yeah.
I bring that to you because we got people watching and listening that they want to do something, and many times we're driven by our pain. And that's all I ever knew was I just got to do.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the struggle part of this 3 acts.
I think that the stage that, because you and I were in the same thing. I mean, we're probably both pretty driven. Probably trying to prove something.
I'm not enough.
Yeah, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And, my dad split when I was a kid, and I was just pretty determined to prove him wrong. That all that sort of stuff. And you're driven by that. That is the hero's journey, and it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's very natural to sort of prove yourself and face challenges and overcome those challenges. That's how heroes transform. So all heroes start very insecure. Luke wasn't sure if he had what it took to be a Jedi. In fact, his uncle told him that he didn't. Which is the strategic scene in the movie. And he goes and he meets Yoda, the guide, on this planet and learns to levitate an X-Wing fighter or whatever that thing was. I'm going to get letters on that.
That's right.
And the challenges transform him until the very end when Obi-Wan Kenobi says, put away that binocular thing and do this as a Jedi. And he's able to destroy the Death Star. And that is evidence that he is transformed. Once you transform, then you enter the next season where you turn around and you begin to help other people through that journey, and that's the guide season. So I think that you and I in our 50s, you tend to kind of post-parenthood, you tend to start making that transition because becoming a parent is the ultimate transition from being a hero to being a guide. Some people sort of never get out of it. They're always trying to prove themselves, even to their 50s and 60s and in 70s, and it ends up looking pretty sad.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're very proud.
Yep.
And you still, are you serious? You're still figuring out who you are? So, you get stuck in those things. Some people stay in victim mentality. They never actually enter the challenge that transforms them. And then some people go to villain where they're actually trying to keep anybody else here from winning. They need other people to be diminished in order to feel good for themselves, about themselves. So, that idea that you wake up every day, and I call it putting a little something on the plot. You can put a little something on the plot here and move this thing forward, I think is what the calling is to all of us. And then at the end of the day, transform. I was just talking, I didn't have a dad. Never saw a man interact with a woman in my home. My mom never dated. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a father. And I went in at 42, very, very late, to getting married and was just not sure. I remember bringing home Emmeline from the hospital going, this is not good. She's not going to have a good dad because I don't know what I'm doing. And man, what do I do? And I kind of resent being put in this position, even though I'm in love with this kid. I would just, shouldn't she have somebody who's more capable? And I had this realization of this is no good to her. She doesn't need a dad who's wondering whether or not he's competent. She needs a dad who's competent. And you better figure this out. And I went on a journey and read every book I could. Thank God for the one good thing about Instagram is it gives great parenting advice all the time. You look at who I follow, it's good business advice, good parenting advice.
Right.
And the other day I'm lying in bed with my wife and My wife is so wonderful. She tells me every day what a great husband I am, every day what a great father I am. That's been part of my transformation. I said, honey, I don't actually have any insecurities about that anymore. I believe you. I believe I'm a really good husband. I believe I'm a really good father. And she goes, you are. And to me, that is a transformation from insecurity to security and confidence. And by the way, what we need are not arrogant dads, but we need dads who are going, oh, every day almost, I say to Emmeline, because she's wanting to swim out past where she can swim or, whatever. Emmeline, what is daddy's job? And Emmeline says, your job is to protect me. And I say, that's right. And I love doing my job. I love it. Know how to do it, and I'm going to do it. Now, it comes back on me when I'm like tickling her, and she's like, your job is to protect me.
Yeah,
And I'm
right,
like,
right.
not right now.
Right. Right.
But, I think that the whole idea of a human life is to become competent at skills and things that serve others. And that, to me, is the most meaningful journey that you can experience. Become really good at useful skills so that you can contribute as part of a team to help others and serve others.
I want to give you the final thought on this idea of truly, how does each and every person, no matter what profession that they're in, no matter what stage they're in their profession or professional life, how do they really embody that role of a guide eventually?
Yeah.
To eventually get there. What's that word of encouragement? And what does it look like?
I interviewed Pete Carroll years ago. I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan. He gave me 15 minutes for a quick interview, and 2 hours later, we're still sitting there talking. It was one of the best conversations I've ever had.
He has one of the most infectious personalities on camera. I can imagine what he's like in person.
Otherworldly. You have no idea. In
I'll
fact,
bet.
he asked me not to talk about all the things that he was up
I'm
to
sure.
because he didn't want football fans to get
Right.
mad at him for not just focusing on football.
Interesting.
He's doing incredible stuff. But he said to me, he said, Don, I had the luxury of succeeding early. And I go, that's an interesting way of saying that. What do you mean luxury of succeeding early? He said, well, when I was young, I won a lot of trophies for my athleticism. And it helped me realize that winning those trophies, there's a diminishing return on success. And I said, diminishing return? He goes, yeah, you succeed once, it feels amazing. You succeed twice, it feels almost as amazing. You succeed 3 times. He says, it just goes down and down and down where it's like, this isn't doing what it used to do. And he said, when I started coaching, I noticed there was no diminishing return on helping somebody else win. It just got better. And he said, I got hooked. I got addicted to it. I got addicted to other people's success. That's a guide. And he is a guide. I mean, Coach Carroll is a guide. I think that's the transformation that you're kind of looking for is, wait, how can my life get to the point where I'm helping other people win and it actually doesn't mean anything to me whether I get credit? Ronald Reagan famously said, it's amazing what a man can get done if he's willing to give other people the credit.
That's good.
And that's a guide. That's the heart of a guide. Our founding fathers, who founded this country? A group of people, you can name 3 or 4. That's guide energy. Nobody's standing up there as the dictator. And so I think that's, that's the spirit, I think, that we're looking for. It's the spirit of Christ, by the way, right? I mean, you look at the scriptures and Jesus is a guide. He's actually not a hero. Now, please understand this in the context. Heroes are weak, can't get the job done, ill-equipped, in desperate need of help, barely making it. That is not Jesus. Guides are never changing, already accomplished what needed to be accomplished, and now you're going to have to accomplish what they accomplished, and they're trying to bring people home. Many guides and stories actually die for the hero, so the hero can win the day. So all of this stuff comes from historical, in my Christian opinion, all story structure comes from what we would call the gospel. That's where it originated. And I realize some Joseph Campbell ideals get in play here, and that's a different nuanced conversation. But because there are a lot of religious structures that look a lot like Christianity, but none of them kind of nail it like Christianity does. But anyway, in order to play the guide, just a practical, tactical idea, there's 2 things that the guide does: empathy and competency. A guide understands the hero's pain. They're attuned. One of our family values in my family is we have 4 family values. One is we are grounded, we are attuned, we are fun, and we are helpful. Miller's are those 4 things. That defines us. So attuned is the one that we are constantly talking about. How do you think that person is feeling? And empathy is very, very important for the guide. And the second is competency. You have to be competent to actually help them out of the hole. Every hero's in a hole. You got to feel for them because they're in the hole, and then you got to get them out of the hole because you know how to get out of holes. And so those are the 2 characteristics of a guide in a story. They are empathetic toward the hero, and they're incredibly competent to help them out. And so if we want to be that, that's what we need. And this, by the way, is incredibly important because what the world needs in our leaders are guides, not heroes. In fact, I believe a hero will cost you. If you play the role of hero, it will cost you your objectives. I remember a buddy of mine called who is the nephew of Jeb Bush. Jeb was running for president. He was 3% in the polls, $112 million in Right to Rise Super PAC, about $15 million in the general campaign fund, should be dominating. He's losing to a television personality called Donald Trump. So they called and said, can you come in? And I said, Pierce, your uncle's tagline is Jeb can fix it. He's made himself the hero of the story, and he's going to lose. And it's why he's at 3%. He made it about him. It's got to be about the people. He's got to be the guide helping the people win, not the hero. By the way, 2 mistakes. Jeb is the hero, and he's fixing it. I don't know what it is.
That's right.
So he's vague.
Yeah.
So we go in, and to their credit, they knock Jeb can fix it off of everything. And 4 weeks later, he was at 12% in South Carolina. And, that's a pretty significant elevation. And of course, lost to Donald Trump, who, by the way, never makes himself the hero of the story, even though he's probably a clinical narcissist. He never makes himself the hero of the story. He's always making you the hero of the story. He's always got a vision for a climactic scene, and he speaks in short, memorable sound bites that can be repeated. Pretty good.
Yep.
He beats Hillary Clinton. What was her tagline? I'm with her.
Yep.
I'm the hero. Apparently just with her, we're not going anywhere.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So this stuff is really important, and people can smell it. They can smell when the story's about you, and they can smell when the story's about them.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can fake that.
I agree.
I think you've got to live it out, and life has got to wreck you a few times. And then you realize, this isn't about me. Thank God. Listen, if you can, I'll wrap with full circle. If you can get a doctor to sit you down and tell you you've got 1 to 5 years to live, and then 8 days later tell you he was just kidding, you should do that.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it will make a guide out of you real fast.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Because you'll just say, I don't matter.
Yeah.
You realize you don't.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need you to succeed. The world needs you to help other people succeed. Because what we can get done together is what no man can do.
I'm glad you brought us full circle. Folks, I told you as we started off today that we're here to learn. These conversations are crafted in a way to help us think and feel and ultimately act differently. So I'm going to give you a takeaway for so much that I wrote down and am thinking about, but I'm going to stay where we started. As Don shared his story of a very scary health situation that brought everything into full focus, I'm taking away from this that I have no idea if it's a heart condition, if it's a disease, or if I get hit by a bus tomorrow. I'm not promised tomorrow. And I want to always be thinking, what are the things that matter most? We're here to talk about winning in your profession and making that contribution. But at the end of the day, as you heard Donald share his story, it got real really fast. And so I am going to challenge you to be thinking, what are the things that matter? If you knew you only had a year to live, and start living that way, because that's what really, really matters. Not your salary, but the relationships in your life. So powerful. Hey, I want to say this. If you're enjoying this episode and all of our other episodes, and you'd love to join us in studio for a live recording, you can check out the link in the show notes for up-to-date info on our guests, dates, and opportunities.